thanks for the introduction. I'm Keane Gruending. I'm the Communications Manager for the Renewable Cities program at SFU Center for Dialogue here in Vancouver. And I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. I've been asked to talk to a toolkit called the 100% Renewable Energy Building Blocks. And as you may know, or as you may have heard, there's an international trend underway for subnational governments, local governments, to be adopting ambitious climate and energy targets. And here in Canada, a number of municipalities have, are undertaking this agenda, but specifically on 100% renewable energy. And that's something that's mainly occurring here in British Columbia, but is also, taking place in other parts of Canada as well. And so Renewable Cities at SFU, we support this work internationally. And we primarily do that as conveners by facilitating knowledge exchange between different sectors, public sector, academia, private sector, and connecting internationally. So that's what we do. So I'm here to talk about the 100% RE building blocks. And this is a toolkit developed by the Global 100% Renewable Energy Campaign. And they're based in Hamburg, Germany at the World Future Council. And the Global 100% RE campaign, it's a member-based organization. Groups all over the world, all of the large world renewable energy associations are members. And so with regard to the building blocks, Renewable Cities has supported this development. We're sort of a junior partner, but really it's the Global 100% RE campaign that's led the work. So first what I'm going to do, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the development of the toolkit, and then I'll get into a quick overview of what these building blocks actually are. So what are they? What are the building blocks? Well, they provide definitional terms about what it means to go to 100% renewable energy. And when I'm talking about 100% renewable energy, I could be talking about the municipality, municipal operations, for the community, sectorally based for electricity, heating and cooling, or transportation. And so what these building blocks provide is a flexible framework for building towards 100% renewable energy. It's a flexible framework and it can be adapted by any level of government. So where do they come from? Well, basically, the building blocks are a culmination of a few years of research and interdisciplinary dialogue. It's been a really organic process. And as you can see here, the developers are really international. Europe, North America, Asia, we have think tanks, different levels of government, nonprofits and associations, and utilities. I have to give you this important caveat. The building blocks are very German-centric in their thinking and in their language. And German institutions have really been a powerful driver, including the German Federal Ministry of Environment. I'm going to hand out a copy of these later on, so you'll have access to a part of the building blocks. So, okay, why are they useful? Are they useful? I don't know, maybe you can tell me. They're really about institutionalizing the community's goals, specifically around a long-term climate and energy plan. They can be based around 100% RE, but really they can be built around anything. Maybe an 80% by 2050 carbon reduction, which is the law of the land here in British Columbia, or even zero waste. They're meant to help check community decisions against community values. So if you say you want to move to a more renewable energy-based transportation system, why are you building more fossil fuel car infrastructure, for example? And really, they're very flexible, and they'll allow different levels of government to sort of mark their own path to 100% renewable energy. And that consists of supply and demand, and social and other factors. So, I'm missing a slide. Well, that's okay. So, just a couple quick use cases. This is the state of Hesse in Germany. The northern half is experimenting with the building blocks. A think tank is working with a number of municipalities to build this monitoring and evaluation framework from the building blocks. There's about 1 million people who live in North Hesse. The other use case here is in Ontario, in Oxford County, and they're building their energy plan around the building blocks entirely. So they've been a driver and a user of this knowledge. Okay, so There's 10 building blocks. I had a slide with all of them lined up beside each other. So what I'm going to do is I've got about 10 minutes. I'm just going to give a quick overview, and then I'll hand them out at the end. So this first building block is really about understanding where you're at as a government and your municipality. What is your potential? It's a bit like an audit and a market analysis. So it asks you to ask the questions, what is the current status of energy use in your municipality by sector? What are the fuel types? What are the GHGs associated with each sector? What are the costs, both to the municipality and to the community? What are the externalities and what do they cost? It also asks you to get to know your resources. So mapping and measuring your renewable energy potential. Maybe that's waste heat, maybe that's solar, wind, geothermal, whatever you have. But resources aren't limited to just energy. You can also think about knowledge and human capital. So talk to the community, utilities, citizens, and try and intersect their interests into broad coalitions. Also consider private sector resources. Oxford County is talking to, Toyota has manufacturing plants in Oxford County in Ontario, and they're working with them to try and intersect their interests. So some of these building blocks are really data and research intensive. So think about different academic resources you can tap into, whether that's a local university or a college, but also think internationally. I know that the West Kootenays, for example, brought in a Danish graduate student to do their resource mapping potential. The second building block is developing a 100% RE blueprint. And the toolkit suggests that all community members should contribute to a shared and inclusive blueprint. It has to align by necessity to other priorities in the community, whether that's economy, job creation, health, air pollution. You need to create a link. And the building blocks ask you to create a SMART, capital S-M-A-R-T goal. I don't know, has anyone heard of this type of this goal? Does anyone want to define it? Offhand, anyone know what it is?
Specific, measurable,
Achievable.
Realistic and timely.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Timed up. Well done. And also, so once you've created that, you also need to think about interim milestones in terms of how much renewable energy you want to use, energy conservation targets, and greenhouse gas emissions targets. By the way, the toolkit says that 100% RE is achieved when the amount of RE generated locally and imported exceeds consumption. It's not about energy independence. The building blocks are very clear that this is best achieved in an interconnected system working with multiple levels of government. Okay. Also component to this building block, you should develop a credible scenario using modeling and economic cost benefit analysis, and also think about measuring the benefits, jobs, energy savings, air quality, whatever's important to you. It's also really crucial to think about people who may be affected negatively by this, and that could be incumbent industries and groups and people who, for example, are involved in fossil fuel extraction, distribution, and use. Their interests are very important to consider as well. The third building block is all about law and regulation. And while it's great to have an aspirational target in place, COP21 in Paris in 2015, for example, there's about 1,000 councillors and mayors from around the world who made an aspirational target to commit to 100% renewable energy or an 80% by 2050 carbon reduction goal. That's great, but what you really need are specific implementation measures. And this can be really tricky where jurisdiction is an issue, and that's why senior government collaboration is important. But also note that globally, municipalities are taking the lead even without the jurisdiction, with an eye to the fact that things can change in the years and decades to come. This is also where you need to think about, or the building block suggests you should think about institutions, whether formally or informally. So maybe you want to form a high-level task force to advise the municipality or the government. And an example of that is the city of Vancouver a few years ago established a high-level panel of business leaders to give advice. But also think about citizen advisory panels and regional committees, because this load can't be borne by the jurisdiction, the municipality alone. Okay, building block number 4. The IEA, which is the International Energy Association, defines energy efficiency as the first fuel. And this is fundamental to achieving any ambitious climate and energy goal. For example, the City of Vancouver's Renewable City Strategy cuts energy use by about half compared to business as usual by 2050. So the energy transition is not just a supply side issue, it's a demand side one as well. The building blocks do suggest that you should create a culture or consider creating a culture of community ownership over conservation. So think about, in primary schools, can you get kids excited about turning out the lights, or can you create competitions between businesses? This is also a retrofits for buildings, and standards for new building construction come into play. So if you are in British Columbia, look into the BC Energy Step Code, which is a great pathway for getting on the road to energy conservation. Here you can also consider different infrastructure opportunities like district energy and waste heat recapture. Okay, so the building blocks call for the upping of renewable electricity. We know that the shift to 100% renewable energy is going to require the electrification of heat and mobility. So that could include increasing the supply through the grid or through local generation. And maybe that's variable RE like solar and wind, or dispatchable like biomass and hydro. And of course you need to be thinking of conservation. Demand side measures like appliances and smart metering and financing and the tools to enable that come into play here. Applying renewable energy to the transport sector is really tricky, and jurisdictions around the world are struggling with this. But on the local government scale, there are a lot of tools available to affect a modal shift. So walk, bike, transit. There are options for electrification of biomass and hydrogen. Some of those technologies are a long ways off, but things are changing really quickly. Okay, financial resources. So I acknowledge financial constraints are a major reality. I am the son of a municipal councillor, so I understand this. And there are no major ones, some magic ones here. So this is where senior governments can be quite important. This may not be applicable to many in this room, but incentives like regional carbon pricing or feed-in tariffs can come into play through this building block. But you could also consider a high shadow price on carbon to drive better municipal decisions on energy and infrastructure. The building blocks do encourage you to get moving, get started, get off the ground. So, there's other things you can consider: public-private partnerships, cooperatives, and crowdfunding, even on a project-by-project basis. Okay, building block number 7, and this is the most German-centric slide of them all. So, Germany has what's called an Energiewende, which is an energy transition strategy for the entire country. And they're looking at 80% renewable energy by 2050. And it's a major shift from large centralized utilities providing the energy to millions of points of power production across the country, including people like you and me. And while that might not be applicable here or where we are or to you, there's some really nice ideas here. Basically, the building blocks do ask that you promote that people learn about energy, engage on energy, have influence on energy, and have the ability to profit from renewable energy production. And what this does is it creates a community stake in energy plans and community will, or political will. It can also reduce opposition to new infrastructure. So for example, in Denmark, I believe there's a law in the books where new offshore wind turbines, a certain percentage of shares are allocated to local people, which fits in with this idea, this concept. You could consider ways to enable citizens to enter the market. Maybe that's a feed-in tariff or a cooperative. I know I've been a member of a renewable energy cooperative here in BC, the Peace Energy Co-op up in the Northeast. But you could also think about providing learning and training opportunities, like maybe workshops to learn about, for example, BC Hydro's net metering. Okay, this is number 8. So there's a couple of dimensions to cooperation. One is the vertical, and unless you're a city-state like Singapore, you are going to need to collaborate, partner with other levels of government, and work in partnership. But what we really do need is strong multi-level climate and energy governance, dialogue, and policy. Some things that would be really nice, I know you might come from different contexts across the country, but here in British Columbia, something like higher carbon pricing, the zero-emission vehicle mandate, provincial strategies for renewable natural gas or transit funding would be really great asks for municipalities to enable the energy transition. So that's coming from the senior government. The second element is horizontal cooperation, and there's two pieces to that. One is engaging local stakeholders, so businesses, indigenous groups, industry, researchers, because they need to be able to contribute ideas and participate, but also consider regional cooperation. Energy production crosses boundaries. Same with transportation. So hopefully you can work in partnership with like-minded municipalities adjacent to you who share the same values. This is the ninth building block. So experimentation and capacity building are important. You're going to need knowledges, skills, and abilities for a trained workforce. For example, how can you enable a deep energy retrofit agenda without an appropriate local workforce? And you can possibly think about this through getting pilot projects off the ground. The building blocks, again, are really, they really do suggest that you just start somewhere and get little projects up and running where you can to build knowledge capacity, but also for show to get people, like citizens, jazzed about renewable energy. And an example would be the City of Vancouver putting solar panels on the Creekside Community Centre, despite the fact the city has a nearly 100% renewable grid. Okay, this is the last building block, and it's engaging in networks. And there's two pieces to that. One is engaging in local networks. I think that's probably why some of you are here. It's why gatherings like this are really important. They're essential for sharing inspiration, providing peer support, but also it's about uniting in on common ground to bigger entities like your provincial governments, utilities, industry, that sort of thing. And then secondly, the scale of the global climate change challenge is daunting. It's huge, it's enormous. How can we make a difference? Engaging in international networks allows us to aggregate small successes and pockets of activity around the world into real wins, which are really essential for learning and inspiration. Does anyone here engage in an international network, like an ICLEI or USDN or anything like that? Yeah. What about national networks like FCM or ICLEI Canada? A few more minutes. Okay. Well, I think I'm probably at time, so I'm just going to skip that. That's all I have to say about the building blocks. It's quite a thick document. I'm going to give you a template, which is a small section of the overall building blocks toolkit, but I encourage you to go online and check out the real deal. The full document has templates and case studies and examples, so hopefully that's useful to you. Thank you very much.